شكرا جزيلا لك على قبولك هذه الدعوة نيكلاس، وسأبدأ معك بالسؤال. لو جرى الحديث قبل عام عن أن السويد قد تدخل الناتو، هل كنت لتصدق ذلك أو لتتوقع حدوث هذه الخطوة؟
Probably not. I mean, I've been a staunch supporter of accession to NATO, but I've been always in a minority, and that the public opinion in Sweden would shift so quickly, I think very few could have predicted.
أحد أسباب غزو بوتين لأوكرانيا هو عدم انضمامه لحلف شمال الأطلسي، لكن السويد طلبت الانضمام. هل أخطأ بوتين في حساباته برأيك؟
I think that this was essentially the main reason. The miscalculation from Putin's side has been major. Not only did he misunderstand how, and I think a lot of us also in the West misunderstood how closely we would stand with Ukraine and how important Ukraine was, and that we would be so successful in defending Ukraine, not militarily, well, not by soldiers, but with everything else. So that has been a miscalculation of Putin. But then the fact that it would push Finland and Sweden into NATO, I don't think that he would have predicted that at all. And I think that in his world, the aggressiveness of Russia would rather keep Finland and Sweden out of NATO, out of fear of what a Russian can do. So yes, I mean, this was a miscalculation that I think is very difficult to overestimate, because I think we have to be honest. The public opinion that shifted in Sweden towards NATO and also Finland is all due to the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Without the aggressiveness of Putin, we would never seen this type of shift.
كيف تتوقع رد بوتين؟ هل حقا قد يفتعل حربا ويضم مولدوفا إلى الفلك الروسي؟
You should never say never. I mean, of course, Moldova is one of these soft spots, and I think that this is in the direction that Putin is moving. He would never attack Sweden nor Finland because, first of all, I mean, he's very much preoccupied in Ukraine. So I'm not worried for Sweden's or Finland's safety in that sense. But definitely Moldova is one of these soft spots that I think that Putin would have imagined that he would be able to take. That said, with the current situation where Ukraine is pushing back Russia, we see his own problems in mobilizing the Russian public. Would he want another conflict on his hand that would even further destabilize his situation? And the question, of course, is what would China do? Will China then support an increased aggressiveness in Moldova? I think it's going to be difficult for China to accept that. So absolutely, it is one of the scenarios we can look at, and I would not rule it out. But it might be the proverbial last nail in the coffin for Putin if he overexpands too much. But it's definitely something we need to be concerned about.
بما أنك ذكرت الصين، طبعا هنالك من يعتقد أن هذا الغزو وهذه الحرب هي امتحان أيضا بشكل أو بآخر للموقف الصيني. الصين تراقب اليوم كيف سيكون مستقبل هذا الصراع، هذا الغزو الروسي على يوكرين، على أوكرانيا، يعني ترى كيف من الممكن أن تتعامل مستقبلاً مع تايوان.
I think initially, before the invasion of Ukraine, I think that this would have been an interesting case for China, because when the West was preoccupied with Ukraine, I think the calculation in Beijing was that we would not care so much about Taiwan. The lessons learned from the Ukraine conflict has been that Well, just because you're so much stronger and so much bigger, it's not going to be an easy target. So even for China now to engage in Taiwan militarily, they have learned that, first of all, that the Taiwanese people, as the Ukrainian people, will not surrender. They will not give in to China that easily. The Taiwanese have learned a lot of military lessons. Maybe you don't need the latest airplanes to fight off China, but you need the latest drones, you need the latest sort of low-tech, well, still maybe high-tech equipment, but not on the fighter plane scale. So I think the assessment from the Chinese is that it will probably be much more difficult to invade Taiwan than it was before. And they also realize that a minor operation is no longer a possibility in Taiwan. So initially, yes, I think there was a bit of a interesting lessons learned exercise. Then they thought they would be able to review it. But I think the lessons has been much tougher for China than they expected. So, which is good. And I think that even so, when we talk about Taiwan, the United States is much more likely to engage militarily on the side of Taiwan.
نعود إذن إلى الناتو والسويد وفنلندا. طبعا واضح أن أمريكا ما تزال هي القوى العسكرية التي يعتمد عليها الأوروبيون، الاتحاد الأوروبي. هل انضمام السويد وفنلندا سيعزز القوى الأوروبية بمعزل عن الولايات المتحدة الأمريكية برأيك؟
I think that as you rightly point out, United States is the backbone of NATO and the Western military capacity. But I do think that the Russian aggression in Ukraine has made us realize that Europe needs to step up as an actor as well. We cannot expect the United States to come to our aid in every single occasion. So I think what we're going to see now is the increased military expenditure, closer to European cooperation that reinforces NATO. But this is going to be a long, long way. And I think we're going to see the dependency on United States remain for long. But I think it's no more than realistic to see the Europeans thinking about a European defense ourselves, but we're far away from it. And yes, I mean, I cannot see Europe independently managing the security, unfortunately, for some time to come.
تركيا وجهت للسويد وفنلندا مجموعة من المطالب الاشتراطية لتوافق على انضمامهما لحلف شمال الأطلسي. كيف ستتعاطى السويد مع هذه المطالب، مع ما طلبته تركيا؟
Oh, that's a very, very tough question. And I do think it's a bit of a negotiation. But the Turks do find the current situation, you know, then the sanctions that Sweden has put on their weapons import and everything as a serious condition. And the Swedes have been very lenient toward the Kurdish minority here so I think it's going to be a difficult task for this government to deal with, especially because they have made concessions to get to the power they currently have. So we do have to probably backtrack a bit on certain issues. And I think that maybe we would lift the sanctions against Turkey of importing weapons. Maybe there will be a tougher position on some of the Kurdish minorities. But I cannot see at this moment that Sweden would hand over Kurdish people to the Turkish government. I mean, that would be we have an election coming up in September, and to go that far would be very, very difficult for the Swedish government at this time. But there's some sort of concessions has to be given from the Swedish side to the Turkish, and the Turks know this. So right now the rhetoric is very tough, but I hope and I believe that we will find some sort of agreement without compromising our soul away.
نعم، ذكرت طبعا الانتخابات المقبلة. طبعا الحزب الحاكم في السويد وافق على هذه الخطوة، ومعروف أن حزب المعارضة يعني كان مرحبا بها بالأصل. كيف سينعكس ذلك إذن على الانتخابات المقبلة في سبتمبر القادم؟
I think very little actually, because what happened was that if the Social Democrats, the current government, would have resisted it, it would have been an election issue. And with the majority of the Swedish population supporting NATO, it would have been to the disadvantage. But now when the Social Democrats, for very good reasons, changed their opinion, they have virtually taken out that factor out of the equation. There might be a few people who as the left party, the former Communist Party, and as well as the Green Party, who is still against joining NATO. There might be some impact on their side, positive or negative. But I do think that the Social Democrats play this really well and minimize the impact it will have with the upcoming election as it looks now. That said, the Turks might actually make this an election issue. Because if this current government has to compromise on its core values, it might turn into something more nasty. But even the opposition might not be interested in changing that, because for them, it's much more important to join NATO than to win a small victory in the domestic debate. So I hope that it won't be really a major issue in the election.
نعم، هذا يحيلنا إلى سؤال أخير. هل هذا يطرح إذن السؤال حول علاقة القرارات الكبرى بالوضع الداخلي كما هو الحال في بريطانيا على سبيل المثال؟
Well, I mean, in one way, of course, this will change fundamentally Sweden's position internationally. At least at the surface, because now we will be part of NATO, an international body with nuclear weapons, which is a problem for Sweden, for some Swedes, I should say. But the consensus is rather strong in Sweden what to do, and even stronger in Finland. So. And let's be honest, Sweden has been a part of NATO for a long time. We've been the best member who has not been a member. So the integration between United States and NATO and Sweden has been going on for quite some time. So I don't necessarily see this raising major issues internally. But this is always a question: if the accession is slow, or if we meet resistance, that would of course raise a number of issues. So potentially it could be a domestic issue, but I don't necessarily see it like that at this particular moment in time.
نيكلاس، شكرا جزيلا لك على هذا اللقاء.
شكرا.